Gotta make sure that LinkedIn's working. So that's always this tricky one. And I say that every time. So the people in Discord and Start Mono, they get to get here a little bit early before the actual stream hits everything. They're probably like, what the hell? Figure it out. Figure it out, bud. Oh, nice. We got a bunch of cool RSVPs on LinkedIn. We'll be tuning in. The event. All right, awesome. We are live. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. John, thank you for being a wonderful mentor, donating your time to help answer questions to the community. Please introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Gary. My name is John duHadway. I have probably more than 40 years of financial expertise. I started out as a CPA working in the Big Four, transitioned from there to CFO of a number of different companies, had a number of exits, but probably four that were very notable. And the last one was in 2007, 2006. And then we essentially shut that company down through the liquidity crisis. The buyer was Merrill Lynch, and they shut that down. And then after that, I started doing fractional CFO work, trying to help out entrepreneurs. So I try to bring institutional finance and accounting to companies before they need it so that they're prepared. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of early stage companies, and try to pass on whatever knowledge I have. So you're getting what you pay for today. So take what you want.
Thank you so much. It's awesome. And I love what your role is and has been in different companies, but now as like a consultant. And it's because so many founders and entrepreneurs are very quick to overlook or completely disregard the finance side, the operational side of the business. And that could be at the earliest stage when they're like, first trying to figure out what they need to do to build a business and put together a financial model and take account for what their expenses will be or should be to operate their business. Or a much later, stage company that's working on getting like, that scaling side capital, right? A Series A perhaps. And they too have overlooked certain aspects that are going to hinder their ability to fundraise and get the investors they want, or cost them a lot of money to get up to speed and present their financials in a way that makes sense to, the investors, where it's not going to be a risky deal. So hopefully everyone paying attention is going to ask really great questions. Post your questions in the chat. If you're on Start Mono where we're hosting this, raise your hand. I see you, Jonah. You'll be up in just a moment to ask a question. You can also use the text chat to ask questions too in Start Mono. But if you're also struggling with anything, you're scared of something, you're challenged with something, or you're just curious, right? Don't be shy to just share what you're kind of going through, even if you don't know how to form that into a question. We'll figure it out. We'll get some context if necessary and get you the support you need. And with that, Jonah, you're up first. Let me send you this invite. All right. Give it a moment to get those permissions set up for your microphone and camera. Camera's optional. There we go.
There you go. Okay, yeah, I'm probably visible and audible now.
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Okay, so I have I feel like new to businesses. I've done a couple of things. I think I have a lot of the millionaire mindset or kind of wealth building kind of ideas and so forth. So I have a number of things pretty well thought out. I've acted a little bit. I'm working for somebody else in his business, part-time landscaping and so forth. And so my question for myself is, I think I have to, I'm interested in wealth building and money building, and I'm interested possibly in real estate. For example, I've heard that's one of the time honored ways of making money, but something else, something that could be very high earning. I might not need to be very high earning this lifetime, but just something comfortable to support myself and a family. And I have aspirations of helping a lot of charities, actually. So I want to think big. I could earn money, or I could approach people with money and ask them to fund charities. I think it's so good to have my own business. There's an event coming up soon, the Vault 2026 in Las Vegas. There's 12,000 different participants. I'm considering going to that. I think I need to dress business attire and have businesses that I want to promote and charities that I want to promote to use that event well. I can fund myself to do things, but I don't have a lot of money to fund myself in the whereabouts of like $4,000 of expendable money. But I'd like to invest it well. And again, I'd kind of like to. I was going to Toastmasters meetings or other things like that just to talk about the business networking, but I'm not too sure what businesses I want to establish and what businesses that I would establish that would best serve me and hopefully best serve the world. I also have big aspirations of like talking to Elon Musk or talking.
Oh, you froze there, Jonah. Did you freeze? Or is this me, John?
No, I'm here.
Okay, all right, all right. So just
Okay.
making sure. All right, Jonah, we'll give you just a moment. I don't know if you'll reconnect in the meantime, but we do have another question.
There you go.
Oh,
Maybe
okay,
am I
you're back.
back?
You're back. Yeah, you're back. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Yeah, all right. Sorry. So you cut
Okay.
off right about like you want to talk to essentially, people that you think are of very high net worth,
Influencers.
yeah, influencers,
Yeah,
yeah.
influencers, money. I was writing just even on principle an open letter to Elon Musk trying to say, hey, you could donate a whole bunch to end world or to help with world hunger, or do this or do this or do that, and see where it goes. But so I'm fine with dreaming big, shoot for the stars and see what happens. But I guess maybe the practical points of what businesses do I start, for example, or money making ventures. And I think just the energy, even if it's philosophical, the energy of having a lot of freedom and fun and play and intuition and open exploration. I have a lot of fine arts that I don't think will earn as well, but I think is a very valid offering to the world, etc. What do I do? What is there anything that you can offer to me? Like, what's some of the highest value I can give the world? And what do I do in a business sort of sense to just have practical steps and see what manifests practically, and so forth. Is that clear? Clear enough questions?
There's a lot there. You've traversed quite a bit of ground there. You know, my 2 cents is, like I said, you've gone all over the map there, which isn't unusual. What I would try to do is find some focus. And, one of the things I always used was a Venn diagram, which basically had, you know, what are my core competencies? Like as a person, what can I do? Um, you know, what is my passion? What do I want to do? And then third, what would drive that economic engine? So where those three circles intersect is probably where I would focus. So you've got a lot of things in your discussion there that were ranging from a very capitalistic type of enterprise to a very gifting and nonprofit type arrangement. So they're both equally something that you could embark on, but I think you have to pick where you want to go. So there's people that would say that it's got to be something that's going to be profitable. I want to make millions of dollars. I want to have an exit. And that's one path. Some of this I also think is like age issues, right? So I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs that in their early life, that's what they wanted to do. Now in their second life or later life, they're looking at causes and trying to help support causes. So you gave me a long question. I'm going to give you a long answer. I think, you really have to kind of distill down what it is you want to do. And that's going to drive where you go. And right now it sounds like you're all over the map. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying, like simple things like networking, you really got to get this honed in. And that's one of the things I see with entrepreneurs is that they certainly have big dreams, which is great, but you got to get it channeled, and you got to get it, more of a rifle approach than a shotgun approach would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something really important in regards to how you're able to matchmake. And a lot of this, in terms of building a career, building a business, finding success, is about matchmaking. And if you haven't taken enough time to hone in on yourself, to find your values, your mission, the culture that you represent, and you want to support in the community and around you, it's going to be very difficult for you to find the right people who align with that and match with that. And you're likely to spend a lot of time chasing after people who are not a good fit. They're not a good match. And that too goes with all the way that you're talking about, John, in terms of figuring out how to manage the project of a venture or a career or whatever the task is that you're trying to accomplish. Like you're saying, it's so important to find that focus and define that real clearly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I've seen people who uh, don't have clarity in what their purpose is, what they want to do, and they'll get into a conversation with an investor or a networking person, and any slight change, investors are, you know, not just investors, but business folks are able to pick up on that. Like if I can have a conversation with somebody and, they're living, breathing, and driving for what they want to do, and they have that passion, but they also have that intense focus. That's somebody that, really attracts interest, as opposed to somebody who says that they're interested in something, and you start having conversations and you see that the sprockets are kind of coming off the engine every now and then. That doesn't give that same feeling of, this is somebody I want to align with, because that's adding risk to my equation. You want to de-risk it, and the de-risking is, I got somebody who's, nails spot on, knows exactly what they want to do, and in some ways it can come across as a negative, because they got blinders on and they're just running through a wall no matter what they need to do to get to what they want to do.
Right. So again, I'm guessing in my mind, to simplify it a bit, though it is a little bit of a creative journey. Um, uh, I choose how to choose a business, or so some specific ones that are already out there for charities. Amma.org, the Hugging Saint, does a lot of work all over the world. She's very well established. So is artofliving.org. I like Charity Water. They provide clean water all kinds of places, and women's doing and education for people who don't have schools in other countries that don't have schools typically. So I could choose and figure out which ones I think are some of the best, and just say I am a lone independent person trying to support these causes. I was hoping a little bit to have mentoring, which I can find elsewhere, with what business do I choose? Again, just using real estate as an example. But building it out, or how much do I need to earn or not? Because maybe I'm super passionate about just helping people, and I need a minimum amount of money for that this lifetime, or what, that I just go and I do all the work. I get involved with the people. I build networks of charities or whatever it is that's really serving people, etc. And maybe try to convince people who have a lot of money. I think it's much better generational wealth to have it for all generations, not just your immediate children and so forth. And I'm sure that I can articulate these things better or more, and have the articulation there and the support there, and maybe, mentoring from other people, or I'm hope, so do you have thoughts about that? Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're conflating things that you have passion about, like, for example, helping out charities versus starting a business. And one of the things that comes to mind is the entrepreneur landscape. You know what I'm talking about, Gary. Maybe we can send that afterwards. But you have the different boxes that forces you to go through and talk about, who are the customers, who's the suppliers, where's the capital, what's the differentiator. Those are the things that you would have to go through. There's no, I can't sit here in a office session and tell you this is the business you need to do. I think it's a journey, and I think you're on it. And I think it's something that you need to answer. But the things I would think about are, for example, you're talking about making money. That's interesting because usually I don't have entrepreneurs. Usually it's like that's a life issue, right? I need to be able to make so much money, and a lot of entrepreneurs, frankly, that's usually not something they're thinking about. So that could be holding you back because the fear of entering into something that you don't know if you're going to make any money. And I can tell you, as a co-founder and founder of businesses, nothing makes you tougher than having to make a payroll. I've run into a lot of people who claim to run businesses, but they were always a corporate employee. They never actually were responsible for funding that payroll. That's what keeps you up at night. That's risk, and that kind of hardens you. But I think you've got that kind of noose around your neck. Like, it's saying you need to make so much money, and you're going to be going through as a filter looking at ideas. Your ideas are all valid. It's just now you got to kind of break them down and put them into, is it something that customers would want? Is it something they would pay for? Break it down into pieces and do discovery. You could do discovery in a lot of different ways, and some aren't expensive. But the one thing I would say is entrepreneurs are typically, they're like, I'll say this in a positive way. Gary knows who I'm talking about, but he always used to say they're like cockroaches. Like they'll survive a nuclear holocaust, but because they're quick, they're nimble, they'll move around. And that's an entrepreneur. You got to be able to adapt and change on the fly, but you still do have to have a gyroscope that's going to give you some sort of focus.
Yeah, I think
So,
what's important here too is, and you can talk more about this, John, especially on the financial side, because again, it all kind of relates. Documentation. Like Jonah, how much have you done to document your passions, your ideas, your goals, your ambitions, the resources you currently have access to, whether that's capital or relationships and influence with people, or, other opportunities that you could maybe barter skills for what you need to move forward with something to start a business. And then also your experience, your expertise, the skill sets you currently have. And then again, like define the mission, the goal, right? And then the values that you represent and the culture that again you want to represent through everything you do. And then start to like, hone in on those different ideas. And, in terms of like methodology of trying to figure out what idea to pursue, in my opinion, and John, you can like, add to this or correct me. I always find that the best idea to pursue is the easiest one to find success with, because the goal is to treat this venture as an investment towards your future. And any success you achieve is going to lead to more success because you'll have more influence, more credibility, more relationships to leverage, more access to resources, more understanding, all these different things. What are your thoughts on that, John?
yeah, I mean, look, I deal with business owners a lot, and they can become business owners in a lot of different ways. There's the true startup. That's somebody who's taking an idea and bringing it to life. You have people who will then also buy businesses, right? So that's another way you can become a business owner. And then there's probably another one, which would be like buying a franchise. So I kind of put those kind of three things out there. If you're thinking of being an entrepreneur, being a pure startup kind of entrepreneur, my thoughts are, you were mentioning a lot of different companies and ways to provide funding for the not-for-profit, but I would look for problems. Like, what is a problem that's happening in the world? What is it that, if there's mainstream big companies that are already tackling it, that's not where I'm going to go fishing. I'm going to go where there's a problem that's not being addressed. So first, try to think about, in your span of your interests, where's that problem? Then what I do is I take that problem, say, okay, how do I create a solution to this? And as Gary had said, I start writing these down. Keep a journal. That's another good thing that I've recommended to people, because your ideas are going to change from day to day. So keep a journal so you're kind of memorializing it. But take those problems, and if you say, okay, I got a solution for it, okay, well, that's great. But if there's only one person in the world that wants that solution and they're not going to pay a lot of money, you really don't have a business to start there, right? So that's a quick no. And quick no's are good. You want to have a quick no, because what you don't want is a long, long, long no where you've invested time, money, and you get to the end and somebody says, yeah, this thing's not going to fly. So it's a little bit art, a little bit science, in my opinion. But I think, it's not for everybody, the entrepreneur journey. There's a lot of uncertainty, but I think the key is from a financial side, I always look at it as anything you can do to start getting it closer to what reality is and getting risk out of it, the more likely it's going to go. And what I mean by that is, if you came to me and said, I have this idea, people have ideas. Everybody has ideas. What makes an entrepreneur is somebody who can take that idea and bring it to life. And bringing it to life means, okay, tell me what's the market size? Is this a one-person market, or is this, millions and millions and millions of people? Is it economical? Is it going to work? Like, will the dog eat the dog food? Is somebody going to buy that product? Those are the things that, as you go through that and you can provide information that shows that you went through it, that starts to bring it to life. And that could be simple things like having focus groups, host a lunch or something and bring a bunch of people in and give them what you're going to do and have them give you feedback. That tells the investor that it's not just an idea, but that you're actually, again, trying to bring it to life by de-risking it. That would be my 2 cents.
That I follow. I guess what I'm thinking is I'm shifting things. This might be rough, but still, my goals and my vision and so forth. The vision is a far more harmonious world, or at least a lot of pockets of far more harmony, more diplomacy, less wars fighting, more, foods, clean, things like that, ways of life, things to release a lot of pain that's happened in the past, a lot more dialogues between people, better dialogues, especially when they're in entrenched camps and not talking. The values might be like all the virtuous qualities and just expansion, enlightenment, whatever in general. I can articulate all that better. Groups that I might be looking to partner with are more progressive groups, all the causes, the various causes, all the crises that are going around the world and the people that are trying to address environmental and wars and political and economic, all of it. So maybe that there's it's distributed. There's a lot of different people working on different fronts. Maybe I'm trying to be overly realistic too quickly to try to prove to the realists.
I think part of it, sorry to cut you off, but I think the issue is, and John, let me know too, like if you're getting this, is the mission in terms of like what you want to do to help people. It seems very clear. You want to help people, you want to improve things. But when you're going from mission to the next first step to move forward to accomplish that mission, you're incredibly broad and you're all over the place. And you need to, like John was touching on earlier, find that focus. And it can't be everyone all at the same time to start. It needs to be just one person that falls within this specific, target customer group or target organization that you feel you can help. And then leaning back on what John said, you need to be able to define what problem you're addressing to help them address this larger, like crisis that they're a part of solving, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if I could tag on to that, Jonah, it sounds to me you've got a very you're kind of mixing your personal feelings and beliefs and passions and vision with a business, and I think they can be separate, but they can be harmonious. My suggestion would be, and this is based off of what I'm hearing, is maybe create your own kind of, what's my personal vision statement? Like, Jonah, what do I want to be? What do I,
Right.
I want to be a good father. I want to be, all the different things you want to do, right? You put that in there, and then you build a bridge to a business venture. So I've got this idea for a business venture. It aligns with my personal statement, but it doesn't accomplish everything in my personal statement. It's an aspect. So maybe it's world hunger is an issue. Great, I'm all aboard. You brought up Elon Musk. He said multiple times, if you gave me a solution, I'd write a check, but it can't. The solution can't be just give me money. So now you take that, you say, okay, fine, I've got a solution for it. Okay, well, that's where I would build a business around that to say, okay, all the things we already said. Is it viable? Is there interest? Is it got economic benefit? And so forth. So.
Right. So what I'm getting is, again, I know I'm talking abstractly, but maybe look up a bunch of progressive groups. Also, define my personal vision, mission statement. And I guess I'm defining them with some flexibility, assuming that there'll be flex along the way, that God, life, spirit, whatever do, don't call it, will, I'll have to update and adjust that as well.
I kind of take a different approach. I think your personal statement's going to be rigid.
Okay.
That's my belief. I have values. My values are me. It's not the world. It's me. This is what I value. These are the things that get me out of bed in the morning. These are the things that drive my engine or get me fueled up. To me, that becomes more solidified, more concrete. Now what I'm doing is I'm looking for ways to tie myself to businesses that are in alignment with that. I don't want to be I'm a health conscious person. I don't want to be doing a business that's tobacco related, as an example.
Right.
That just
Sure.
It's in conflict.
Sure.
That tobacco business could be as profitable as anybody could want, but it doesn't align with my personal values. Okay, so
Right.
that just immediately just gets knocked off the plate. I don't spend any time even considering that. I do start looking at things that do align with what my values are. So that maybe it's a little counter to what you're thinking, but again, just one person's view. I would say
I'm following this all. It's good.
Yeah.
I think I can decouple or separate out how do I make money. I have enough money to be frugal, but then I may or may not start a business or something, or have somebody else that funds me, or have something or other just to take care of myself. I'm opening the door to maybe having a partner, children, or family, and over anticipating, well, how do I have finances or et cetera, before that. But I think the bigger thing is, my big mission statement and getting it articulated on a lot of different levels, because I feel it, but I don't always have the words for it, maybe, and to enroll other people, or to say, look, this is what I'm doing. Again, open letters to various people might be a good place to start. And I'm just guessing, what do you think about all the, established things that are nonprofit or otherwise that are already doing the peacemaking, peacekeeping kind of work in the world? I align with the Christian church's mission somewhat, or the other places, more the mysticism or some other people. So just major institutions that are already doing these things, seeing what they're doing, and then asking them if they want some improvements or other thoughts, or if they want money or coordination. Like, again, because I'm just one lone person, maybe get the lay of the land before I try to change a bunch of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a hard road to go. To me, you got to do your personal vision. I call it a personal vision statement, and it has your values and all that. That's going to live regardless of what I do for life. Like whether I'm an entrepreneur, whether I'm a student. I mean, that is its own thing. So in my personal vision statement, part of it could be I want to have a certain amount of wealth. Or maybe that's not something that's important to me. But my point is, if you don't have clarity to that, then you're never going to be able to get a business to align with what that is. And then as far as going to some of these big charities, they all want money. And so I guess what I'm struggling to understand is, other than providing them funding, how do you develop a business? If you're trying to develop a business.
I'll the business to the side for now, and go just supporting things in the world. I can live off minimal things if people want to house me or clothe me. I have some money saved up and some connection to family that can support me for now. I'll just go to getting the charities, well, getting people with money who want to donate to something better in front of charities, or like getting, make connections with people that are
Jonah,
already established.
what you're touching on is something I think is kind of in the right path, and we got to move on to another couple questions. But
Yeah.
To conclude,
Yeah.
what you're talking about, I think, is a great starting point. For everyone listening, for whatever you want to do, you especially want to build a business, you should take time to understand the inner workings, the systems that exist, what the status quo is of operations, the different stakeholder relationships and dynamics, all these different things before you start to like try to start a business in that industry or market. And one of the best ways to do that is to get a job working for a charity. And then you're making money. And you're also learning on the job how these things work. And you're identifying where all the problems are from inside. And you're also, again, building these relationships with the people who are the decision makers and their networks, right? And short of that, because it's nonprofit, you can volunteer for these different organizations as well. And you're still going to get a similar insight. You're not going to get paid while doing that, right? But it's just another option while trying to take all this abstraction and make it into concrete tangibility, like John has explained. And that's going to allow you to be more effective also as a communicator, because it's very difficult for you to make headway in where you're going and get other people to understand it and want to rally around you if it's too abstract, right? It needs to be action items. And that's what John was kind of touching on earlier, is when you're reaching out to people and communicating with them to get support, to build relationships. If you're too abstract with these things, people are left feeling confused, uncertain, kind of coming up with their own conclusions that are going to be largely disconnected from what you actually are seeking out and trying to help them with or seeking support from them. But hopefully that helps. If we have extra time, we can bring you back up, but we're going to jump to some other questions. But thank you for being first and being vulnerable and sharing all this. And yeah, being first. Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Awesome. Sweet. Okay. Next one we got is Shiva. Shiva asks, can I own a pre-existing company under my company as a parent company? The conditions are my company is a holding company, and is it possible to own 100% of the parent company to hold control of the subsidiaries?
Well, sure. First of all, this isn't tax advice or legal advice, but typically you can have a holding company that you would own, and then that would have subsidiaries that it owns. You got to get into what types of entities they are and whether they have that ability or not. So if you get into sub S, there's restrictions on what a sub S can own and who can own a sub S. But generally speaking, yeah, you can do that. Is there more to that question, or?
That's the only question so far. We might get some follow-up, but I do see this often in the community, John, where especially earlier entrepreneurs, founders, they are trying to create these very complicated business structures with different entities, with different subsidies and such, thinking that it's going to save them money. But I'd love to hear your...
better.
Yeah.
Easy, simple. We used to call it the KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Have one company. You could always have cost centers and things like that within that company to kind of segregate different product lines and things like that, if that's what your concern is about. But you have to think about your future round. So even if you're funded today, that future round is going to look at the complexity of your cap table as well as your entity structure. And if it's complex, it's risk. It's just not worth it. Unless we're talking about a very, very large company or there's a particular reason why you need to have that. So for example, if you acquired a company and you did an acquisition and you're trying to keep it separate for tax purposes for a certain reason, or if there was, a product issue that, trying to isolate liability to that entity, those types of things. But if it's just building and putting every new product or new idea into another company, I would encourage you not to do that.
You've mentioned risk a couple times, and I
Mhm.
love that you've been saying you want to de-risk. You want to de-risk. When it comes to the risk involved in some of these things, what does that risk lead to in terms of material consequences that people should be aware of and ultimately, like, very concerned about avoiding?
Well, the most severe risk would be that nobody wants to touch it. So you become, um, the hot iron nobody wants to touch. And that's because it's just got too much risk. But if you can compartmentalize risks, and risks come in all different shapes and flavors, right? You have regulatory risk, you've got geopolitical risk, you've got customer concentration risk, you've got getting out of bed is a risk, right? So we live in a world of risk. That's not unusual, but what is unusual, or I should say, what is not normal, is I don't see every entrepreneur taking that big bucket of risk and breaking it down and showing an investor how they've either um, capped it or that they've mitigated it. And that starts to speak to the investor. So if I'm an investor coming in, you have to speak to me in my language, not your language. And I know that sounds a little odd, but an investor's coming in, and like we said on the prior call, if you're all over the board, and after a while, it's like, okay, I got brain overload. I'm out. Check, done. But if you got my attention, I start getting into it. What I'm going to be looking at is I'm looking at market. Is this got a big market? Have you thought it through? Have you come up with ways that you can show me that there is a there? Like, so it's easy to put in a PowerPoint deck that your sales are going to go from 0 to $1 billion. Uh, but now you got to break that down. Show me, well, how are you going to get that first sale? Do you have any sales? If you don't have sales, how close are you to getting the sale? I've got customer commitments, or I've got people who've given me endorsements. Anything you can get that gets closer to actually having it execute is a way to de-risk that particular issue of whether you're going to have sales. Same thing on the expense side, same thing on any other risk. But that's kind of the way I look at it. I always kind of think that there's no way to be absolved of every risk, but the more you can kind of cut that down into pieces that you can cut off to the side and demonstrate to an investor, the more palatable it is to that investor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And like I'm saying in some of the chats, it's very important because, and this came up like the last two office hours because we're talking with Kristen Bell and Blake Baxter, who are involved in like the investor VC world, that every investor that's getting pitched is being, they have endless choices in terms of like, this is the greatest opportunity to make you money. But what's not equal, as you're alluding to, is the deals that have been able to demonstrate how they've faced adversity, overcame that adversity, addressed risk, managed risk, and controlled that risk. And yeah, they're looking for the least risky option available of all these same deals offering the same opportunity. So I think it's very important that you brought that up and touched on that. Um, yeah, we got another question from Lazy Eclipse. What do you think is the most necessary as a founder? For me, I'm hella scared. I don't know what to do. I mean, I have a friend uh, with who takes care of the technical side, and looking at him, I feel like I'm slowing him down. I'm currently working on a way to fundraise. So yeah, so for someone that's feeling lost as an entrepreneur, early entrepreneur, trying to figure out what to focus on and what they can do while the technical partner, co-founder is building, what do you recommend in terms of like the best way for them to contribute?
So, if you're not the technical partner, and assuming we're in a situation where you're both equal partners, to me, it would be really getting kind of ahead on things like fundraising. The best time to fundraise is when you don't need the funds, right? So you want to do it earlier, not later. If you wait until the moment that you know the checks aren't going to clear, then that that just puts leverage against you, puts you in a bad position. Right out of the gate, you don't look very attractive because you haven't planned for that. So if your partner is the technical partner, I would jump in and start being the administrative partner, handling things like accounting. If you've got HR people, if you have to hire people, handling all the legal matters, things like that, let them, continue to do development and try to, like I said, get ahead of those things. So where the business is going to go, then you can start to anticipate what these different, I'm overusing the term risks, but what the risks are going to be. How do we address those? So, IP as an example, you're creating IP. What are we going to do about that? Your technical partners banging away at the keyboard and creating all kinds of great technology. I would be the one then working with counsel, trying to get that asset protected so that now I have something that can get funded. I'd be working on my business model. How do I, first of all, present it? How do I look at the key areas and demonstrate, what we're going to have? Like, for example, market share, market size. How do we fit in? There's a whole bunch of things I think I could do. It's certainly scary, and that's why the entrepreneur journey is not for everybody. But I think there's a lot of things that could be done, and the sooner the better. Because if you wait and you get painted into a corner, it usually doesn't come out the way you want it. And I always kind of say almost anything can be accomplished with time and money, right? And if you don't have either, it's kind of hard to accomplish some things. So at least if you've got time on your side, use it to your advantage.
Yeah, I think that too is like you're touching on so many important aspects of just building a real business, right? Because a lot of like founders, entrepreneurs, they think they got to rush to get investors, and that's the only way for them to pursue this success. But if you're going slow and steady and you're taking the time to, like, you're touching on earlier, just kind of starting with, your own personal mission, your own personal, values and everything, and building out from that, little by little, you're still making progress. And if you're taking the time to build an actual business model before you launch, you're already ahead of many other startups because you're putting a focus on how you're going to monetize this, how you're going to generate revenue. And a business needs revenue. It doesn't need investors. It needs revenue, right? And so that's awesome. And for you, excuse me, lazy, in your role too, like John's talking about, document everything. Start documenting everything so you are ahead of everything. Because, and this goes for you too, Jonah. When you have documentation, it makes it easier for you to evaluate your thoughts, your processes, your systems that you're designing, your product, all these different things that you want to do. And it's so much easier to catch things that you are overlooking because in your mind, or if you're just like, building from your gut and, just vibing it out, it's so much harder to account for all these little nuances that could be critically, like, critical failures to what you're trying to accomplish.
If I could tag
Yeah,
on to that
yeah.
real quick, documentation I think is a big point because as an investor, you're going to tell me a story, and the story is going to sound good, and then I'm going to try to do a litmus test against what's been done. You want to put me in your shoes. I got to get into your head and see what you see. And the only way I can really do that is if you've got it documented, I can then follow the process and follow what's been going on. Now I'm living and breathing it kind of a few steps behind you, and I can see what you see. But if you just have nothing documented and you're just telling me this story, I just can't get in there. And then the last thing I would add is, I always try to tell entrepreneurs, think about the compounding effect. So if you just are consistent, every day you're accomplishing one thing and you're knocking it off, over time, you're going to be accomplishing a lot, as opposed to the person who thinks about a lot of things and doesn't do anything for a week and then does one thing. And then another week does one thing. It's taken them 2 weeks to do two things. And by the end of 2 weeks, you've done 10 things if you're only working 5 days a week. So you got to think about that way. Entrepreneurs have to be fast. That's one of the best assets that you have. Sorry, guy.
No, that's awesome. And I think too, like in terms of being fast, like you want to be fast by managing the risk. And that's where I think a lot of founders go wrong, is that they think the goal is to go as fast as possible and fail fast. It's one of these sayings I really despise because it frames it in a negative. It frames the negative as a good thing. You don't want to fail. And if you're taking on too much risk, you're going to fail. But if you're going fast while managing that risk and being aware of it, you're going to likely find success. And it goes to what you're talking about too, about being agile and nimble. Lean methodology, the lean model canvas, I shared that in the chat, which is what you're referring to.
Yep.
So yeah, do you have any like other kind of like insights and thoughts about where that balance is in terms of like going fast but not being
Yeah.
reckless?
I mean, there's a saying, Navy SEALs say it. It's slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So the point is continue moving and not to be, just like running reckless abandon. It's going slow, but going consistently moving. That creates smoothness. And as you're going through that, that ultimately makes you fast. So slow, smooth, smooth is fast. That's something I've always been attracted to.
I like that. I might start using that too. Shiva asked, one more question. Most of the young entrepreneurs are going blindly into drop shipping. What's your view on drop shipping?
Well, you probably have a concentration issue, right? So it's hard to answer that just generically. One, I think drop shipping, you don't have the customer connectivity, so that's one thing I'd be concerned about is how how's my customer look at that? So if it's a product that just shows up on my door because it's being drop shipped, um, what's the perception from the customer? And again, I would use focus groups. Say, hey, what do you think? And if you take a group of 25 customers and you get feedback from them and that they say, I don't give a crap, just get the thing here, I don't care what labels on it, maybe dropship works for you. But I kind of think that I'm always a big believer in having a customer relationship, because at the end of the day, that's my asset. If I'm just drop shipping, I'm almost a commodity, because if somebody else can drop ship it at a lower price, then what's my seat at the table? So I don't think they're all bad, but that's couple of thoughts that I would have just in general.
I think those are great thoughts, and it's really important what you're talking about because yeah, a lot of these dropshipping businesses, they're marketed as like easy ways to be an entrepreneur and make quick money. And like you're saying, if you don't understand business, you don't understand how to differentiate yourself as a brand and capture customers in a way where you're essentially building a community around your brand, where they're like, bought in. They are committed to you and your brand. You don't have anything that's actually defensible at all.
Yeah.
You don't have an IP, you don't have anything else, right? The only thing you can build is that community. So being able to understand how to do basic business in terms of marketing and sales, and that also starts again with defining yourself and then your brand, the mission, the values, the culture, and then aligning that with the correct customers that are going to be most excited to learn about that and engage with that and be willing to pay a premium because you're satisfying this, aspect of their ego or self-identity or, how they want to be perceived in relation to how your brand is seen, as an extension of who they are. So it's yeah, I think it's great, like your take on like drop shipping. Um, I said we talk about hockey a little bit, so I want to bring this up. So hockey, playing hockey, being a coach, how has that aspect of sports and being involved in sports, but even as a fan, like watching how other organizations are run or operated, even from like a high level, because you're not actually inside like like the Philadelphia Flyers like front office, but how has this informed the way that you interact with people as a professional, build teams, define culture, lead, act as a teammate to others, like, or even just like, engage in others in the community and be like, a good neighbor?
Wow, wasn't ready for that. That's a great question. By the way, I do have connections to NHL. Keith Jones is a friend of mine, so I text with him every now and then. And um, you know what it's come to me is, first of all, I've been everywhere from being a young kid and playing up through the ranks, and then I was in college, and then I started coaching, and then all roads lead to beer league. But what I find is the business has become a business. In the past, it was kind of a hockey club. Now there's, it's a business. And what I take from it is a lot of it to me comes from values and vision. Because I'll use the Flyers as an example. The Flyers were a great, some would call it a dynasty back in the 70s. We had some good years. I'm from Philadelphia, if nobody knows, but so they're my team. And we had some really good years. But since 73, 74, we've not been back. And so we were, we had this vision. We were basically called, well, we were called the Broad Street Bullies. So we had this swagger and we had this culture of, we just had guys that were willing to lay it out on the ice and to, do what they needed to. And so through ownership changes, because it was owned by an individual, Ed Snyder, who had passed away, but when he owned it, it was basically like a benevolent dictator, right? It's Ed's way because he owns the team. And I say that in a positive way because this can transcend into other areas like golf courses and things like that I could talk about. But it became corporate. And so what ended up happening was they, I think, lost their vision. They started bringing in a bunch of guys who were alumni, but not necessarily right for the job. I think Keith and Danny Briere came back, and I don't think being an alumni is necessarily a bad thing, but I also don't think it's necessarily a good thing. In this case, I think it was a good thing. Came in with the idea of, we're going to go back to kind of our basics and get back to rebuilding a franchise. And a lot of that was winning back the fans, because the fans were really disenchanted. We get into a lot of reasons why. And so if you watched them this past year, it was a group of guys that nobody predicted. They had I forget, what is it, 3% chance of going into the playoffs at the beginning of the season is what they were predicted. And at the end of the year, they had come together. And so for me, comparing that to businesses, I think it's very much the same. It's not necessarily having a superstar. It's about having people who can work together and that are willing to fight for one another, willing to do what they need to do, follow the coach, follow the plan, follow the guidelines, and just leave it on the ice. And consequently, they started to believe in one another because they started to win. And once that started happening, now you've got a culture where other people want to be part of it. And now they're able to attract people too. So it becomes kind of a snowball, and it's going in the right direction. It can go the other way. So Anaheim Ducks might be going the other way right now. But Philadelphia, I'm biased, but I think we're rolling and we're going in the right direction.
I love all of that. And what you started with was identity, right? Like the Broad Street Bullies, that identity, and that identity leading to the culture, and the culture leading to what the fans are building around and resonating with, and what how a community is being galvanized around that identity. And that
That's
applies to
right.
like every business, like we were touching on earlier, right? It's like, if you're able to define, again, mission, values, culture, those things should stay the same for yourself, for your business. The vision is what changed. And that's like, with Jonah, right? What, kind of like what was being alluded to there was the flexibility should be in the vision, figuring out what path to take to achieve that, mission, represent those values, represent that culture through what you're doing. But the vision is going to change with time, with technology, with society. with yourself, right? Because people learn and grow and develop in new ways. But like, you know, taking the time to define that is what's going to lead to how you're going to understand how to execute and build a brand that is recognizable and resonating with the people that you want to connect with. And I think that's like such a wonderful, beautiful thing. And you know, this like, yeah, the impact of hockey and you know the experience of just being a fan or a player and all that. Like, I encourage everyone, if you're not involved with sports, at least find other group activities to participate in. Like, in one of the communities, we're talking about playing Magic the Gathering, a tabletop game. Go do stuff like that with other people and communities, and you'll find that same sort of dynamic that John just described, where you are coming together, you're sharing this, you know, passion, this interest, these goals together, and finding ways to not just work together, but really respect each other and how we're all humans and we're all contributing in like the same way. We're coming up on 5 minutes of time. If anyone has a final question, now's the time to drop it in here. But if not, John, we've covered a couple different things, and we haven't even like touched like you know like the surface of your expertise and knowledge and experiences. So I'm curious, you know, what's the one thing that you would call attention to for an early stage founder and a late stage founder, like, you know, one that's trying to raise, like, you know, their series A versus one that's trying to do their pre-seed round? And what would you recommend in terms of being mindful of that, but also, you know, addressing that? What kind of like methodology or approach would you share?
Well, I don't think no two entrepreneurs are alike, and no two businesses are alike. So I think that's where experience comes to help. And so I think this is for both the early and the later stage founder. You have to, I find that people who are the weakest are the ones that don't bring in people to help. The people that are strongest are the ones that do. And, you know, we're not Superman or Superwoman. You know, there's just too much, too large of a span of issues and variables. So that's a long way of saying I would not be afraid to tap into experts. That could be you create an advisory board. That could be you've got a networking group that helps you out. That could be you're hiring somebody to help you out, depending upon how significant things are. But you're going to save a lot in the long run if you are willing to listen and take some expertise from people who are willing to give it to you. Um, I've seen many people who, for example, I have one client I'm working with now where they had a successful company and now they're trying to do the same thing. They're using the same blueprint, and they didn't have the right experts, and they're almost upside down right now. So I'm trying to help them out and course correct it. But those things could have been avoided had I or somebody similar to me was involved early on. So that's an example where you would think, oh, it's just the same business, just replicate it. Well, no, there was different circumstances, different people were involved to guide it and things like that. So long answer, I think expertise, and the reason why is just because, you know, with that global question you gave me, there's just so many different nuances, different issues, assumptions in every one, and that's where your experience matters.
I love it. I think that's great. And it also, like, again, echoes so many of like our other wonderful mentors and myself, calling attention to context and nuance. And that's why it's so important to, like, early on, reach out to mentors. You don't have to ask someone to be your mentor. Just reach out to them as if they are a mentor and ask for feedback, advice. Get some eyeballs. Go to other opportunities where you can practice pitching. You can get, like, you know, like feedback sessions, whatever it is. Just get eyeballs on it and try to, again, align that with the right people who have that experience and expertise. And also, like, you know, touching on this, and Jonah, I'm gonna bring up real quick for like a 90-second, like, you know, before John needs to go. But it's really important to, like, to spend time vetting people's methodology, like, because bringing in an expert, they might do the same thing. And I've experienced this too, where I've hired someone in marketing and they're like, oh, we're just going to do the same playbook I do for everyone. And they didn't take the time to, like, contextualize the differences and what was going on. And it was a failure, right? So their methodology was just atrocious. They didn't have a methodology, it was bad. All right, Jonah, you got an invite to jump up if you want to, real quick. And we're going to keep it so short. So, yeah, be concise. And I have to tell
Well,
myself this all the time, too.
right. I got a lot of great things out of that. I guess I'm just reiterating for now that group activities and find communities and find people and allies really resonates big for me. I think there's more like reworking things and let the journey unfold as it does. Though I also understand clarifying my purpose, power, and focus, and so forth, and then finding, like in a martial arts kind of metaphor, finding good sparring partners, finding good ways to strengthen myself, finding good allies along the way, and more experiences in the world. So unless you want to add to that, I really appreciate all of this, and I'll see what I can do, in the world and make happen.
Well, I wish you a lot of luck. One other saying we use in sports is when we had offense fighting against the defense, it's steel sharpens steel, right? So yeah, have people that are willing to be. You don't want yes people. You want people that are going to actually tell you, that's a bad idea. I'd rather hear somebody tell me that's a bad idea before I do something than just say yes and then find out later on.
That's so
Right.
important. That's so important because it challenges you and you want to be challenged. And the challenge there is to prove that you're correct or figure out why you're wrong, right? In either instance, you're going to learn more. You're going to have more knowledge to act on in a more informed way. Like I say this often, it's a series of experiments. It's an iterative cycle. You want to just make sure that you're approaching everything in a scientific method. So the goal is to test hypothesis and assumptions, learn from the data that you're collecting through the test, and be able to apply that to wisdom and make more calculated decisions in the path you're taking. This is great. We have, if you can, we had one more question come in. John, it's a quick one.
Sure.
What's the most efficient way to analyze market and minimize losses? I mean, a lot of people I saw predict, um, like they know the future. How do they do it? Do they have future vision or something? I've been learning about markets, but the more I learn, more complicated it gets. So, yeah, on the finance side of analyzing markets and such, what are your advice on this?
So on one end of the spectrum, we have people who just say it's a big market and they don't know. And if as an investor or prospect, I'd come in and that would scare me because I can't get in your shoes. It's not about being right. I think it's more about having a methodology to come up with what you believe the market is. And so that would be, you know, that would encounter, what's your product or service, and based upon that, how many people or customers are there potentially that are out there. So that would take you through the whole, TAM, SAM, SOM kind of analysis. But without, it's not a concrete answer for you, but I think the biggest part is doing your homework. You need to know how you come up with the market. Um, and that can be, taking demographic data, slicing and dicing it, and coming up with a hypothesis on what it is. It could be doing that and then reconciling that to other analysts and things like that that might cite the same type of market, and how does yours compare? Why is yours higher or lower, and can you reconcile it? Um, Lastly, you probably have AI. I mean, you can use a lot in AI to help you go through analyzing the market. I say that with a little tongue in cheek there because I've seen people put stuff in AI and get an answer and just use the answer. And that's not what I'm saying. Use it for brainstorming. And then ultimately, when you come up with your market, you got to know the algebra behind it. Because as Gary said, the documentation of that's going to be extremely important, because if I or other investor walks in and the answer is a blank sheet of paper, it's not going to go well.
That was a great answer. And again, like, yeah, I love the theme of this. And you're a CFO, so of course, so much of this is revolved around risk, but also the emphasis on context and gray area and taking the time to practice critical thinking, right? And that in the world of AI is something like you touched on is in, short demand. Like we need
Yeah.
to have more of that in practice, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur, especially if you want to build a successful career, and especially if you want to get investors, giving you money. Because there's so many people that are trying to cut corners using AI, and it might get them in the door, but when it comes to due diligence, like with Irina Kukuyeva, who's, frequent
Mhm.
mentor with us, she looks at these deals and her whole like like job as a data scientist, AI scientist is to identify who is faking it and who's actually making it. So this is wonderful. John, you've been fantastic. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, I'm so glad that we've like known each other for so long, and you've been such a wonderful community member and mentor and force. And yes, thank you for giving us your time. Um, before we like go, any like final thoughts, anything you want to share with the community, anything you want to plug, feel free to. Now's the time.
Well, I'm not going to give a plug. I'll just say, Gary and his efforts, particularly with the community out here in Hub 101, has been tremendous. And so you're good hands there. And feel free to, through him, you can get a hold of me or a whole slate of different mentors and advisors. But keep your dream alive. Work hard. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And keep plugging away.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, everyone, thank you for being, again, brave and bold, posting some questions. Jonah, thank you so much for being, yeah, extra vulnerable, coming up and sharing, and yeah, being on camera too. And that's like super special. So with that, thank you, everyone. We got more mentor office hours next week. We'll see you then. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Take care, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye now.